Traditionally, dating back to the founding of Mongolia, Mongols worshipped heaven, or the clear blue sky, and followed the ancient Northern Asian practices of shamanism. Shamanism is a religion that is based on the idea that the visible world is pervaded by invisible forces, or spirits, that affect the lives of the living. Shamans, certain selected members of the community, are credited with the ability to diagnose, cure, control the spirits, the weather, and interpret dreams. They are also thought to be able to travel to the upper and lower worlds. Numberless spirits were said to be vastly responsible for both human luck and misfortune. Finally, Buddhism began to penetrate Mongolia via Tibetan Buddhism. In the 1200s, Tibetan Buddhist master Sakya Pandita Kunkha Gyatso and his nephew Pagpa came to Mongolia to discuss Buddhism with Mongolian authority Kublai Khan. Conveniently, Kublai Khan took a liking to Buddhism and asked Pagpa to act as a court priest in his headquarters. Initially, Tibetan Buddhism spread rapidly among Mongolian nobility and upper class. Eventually, it began to spread and influence the thoughts of a vast amount of Mongol people. The Mongolian people have faced a devastating history of conquer and defeat, however, and in time, with the collapse of the Yuan dynasty and eventually the isolation of Mongolian lands, Buddhism and other religions slowly faded away. This abandonment of Buddhist faith by the Mongolian people resulted in a revival of the old shamanistic religion. Finally, in 1578, Altan Khan, the Mongolian military leader, formed an alliance with the head of the Yellow sect of Tibetan Buddhism, where Altan Khan promised to protect the Buddhist school. He gave the Tibetan leader the title Dalai Lama, Ocean Lama. It was fitting that Tibet and Mongolia would adopt similar religious doctrine because they share such a similar cultural style of nomadic pastoralism, which is very different from the Chinese. It did not take long for the Yellow sect of Buddhism to spread throughout Mongolia. Mongol aristocrats pushed the people of Mongolia to study this new religion because their ultimate goal was to achieve religious sanction and unite all Mongols in a single state. Monasteries were built throughout Mongolia. Buddhist monks struggled with the shamans for religious control. Eventually, they succeeded in taking over the functions of the traditional shamans as healers and diviners. It was not long before shamanism, the original religion of Mongolia, was pushed to the religious and cultural fringes of Mongolian culture. Tibetan Buddhism combines elements of Mahayana and Tantric schools of Buddhism with traditional Tibetan rituals of curing and exorcism, and it shares the common Buddhist goal of individual release from suffering and cycles of rebirth. In Mahayana, the Buddha is recognized as an idealized man-god who is omnipresent in all times and places. The Tantric school of Buddhism, or the Vajrayana, alleges to provide a speedier path to enlightenment through the use of Tantra techniques. This school contests that full enlightenment, or Buddhahood, is possible and attainable in a single lifetime. Tibetan Buddhism also focuses on the individual release from suffering, the different cycles of rebirth, and the stages of enlightenment. In particular, the Yellow sect stresses the use of logical and formal debate as aids to enlightenment. As discussed in Tantric schools, a central element to Tibetan Buddhism was the notion that people could achieve Buddhahood in their lifetime and the reincarnation of previous leaders. These figures were referred to as incarnate or living Buddhas. These people were usually Mongolian nobles who supervised ordinary monks and lamas. They are thought of as the revered ones. By the 20th century, Buddhism had penetrated deeply into Mongolian culture. By this point, with the end of the Chinese domination, the Buddhist establishment and its clergy provided the only political structure available, and thus began to look a lot like a weakly or organized theocracy. Mongolia soon came upon more devastating times during the 1930s and the rise of the Stalin era. Since the Buddhist Church had no intentions of modernizing or reforming, the Soviets destroyed and seized many monasteries and Buddhist centers. Lamas were even accused as counter-revolutionaries. During the years that Mongolia was under Soviet control, the people of Mongolia were more or less forced to return to a secular life. The Buddhist Church was forced out of political and public administration. They were not allowed to teach Buddhist teachings to children and were not allowed to anoint new monks or replace living Buddhas. During World War II, the government of Mongolian People's Republic and the ruling party of Mongolia finally allowed the recovery and reintroduction of Buddhism under the government's official guidelines. Buddhism had played a crucial role in the country's history, culture, national identity, and arts, and it would be simply wrong to cut out Buddhism in Mongolia altogether. Mongolians and Tibetans have had to overcome much hardship and fight many enemies to hold on to their sacred religion and land. The legacy of Jetsun Dampa is another important aspect of the Buddhist religion in Mongolia. Khalkha, the largest district in Mongolia, Jetsun Dampa, Lord of Refuge, is primarily known for establishing Buddhism throughout Mongolia and Central Asia. He is widely thought of as the Mongolian Dalai Lama. He is considered to be one of the most revered teachers of the Kalkachara Tantra, the Tara Tantra, and the Mayara, the future of the Buddha. The first Jetsun Dampa was named Tenpai Gyatsan Rangjung Yeshe Dorje. At an early age, he was recognized to be an incarnate Lama, and at the young age of 14, in 1650, he made a pilgrimage to Kumbum in Mongolia, the birthplace of Jade Tsongkhapa. Later on in his life, he ventured to central Tibet to visit the fourth Panchen Lama, Panchen Losang Kogyan, and the fifth Dalai Lama, Luang Losang Gyatso. It was here that the fifth Dalai Lama recognized that he was the reincarnation of the Saint Tarantha, who was respected as the chief lineage holder of all traditions. After this realization, the fifth Dalai Lama and the fourth Panchen Lama then became the first Dalai Lama's teachers and instilled on him all the initiations, oral transmissions, and commentaries of Buddhist religion that he would need to know in order to fulfill his duties as the reincarnation. Finally, after his initiation-like process, the first Jetsun Dampa returned to Mongolia, where he firmly established and helped to spread Buddhism throughout Mongolia and Central Asia during the time when Tibetan Buddhism was flourishing in Mongolia as the religion of the upper class, nobility, and also of the common people. Monasteries were continuing to be built, and monks were continuing to be anointed. Jumping ahead several years, the ninth and most recent Jetsun Dampa is recognized as another important figure in Mongolian Buddhist tradition. At the mere age of 7, he went to Gomang College, Drepung Monastery as a sample monk, where he studied for around 14 years up to the level of Madhyamaka. The Dalai Lama eventually even gave him his Dharma lineage. Redding Rinpoche recognized the ninth Jetsun Dampa's incarnation at the age of 4. His identity was kept a secret, however, because of Stalin's influence and oppression in Mongolia. At the age of 21, the ninth Jetsun Dampa left college and engaged in a series of child meditation. He lived a life of a yogi, a person who practices yoga and is bound to a particular moral code of morality and restraint, while on a pilgrimage to the holy site of Tibet. From 1981 to 1991, he served as Lama for the Tibetan community while the Chinese forced him and the Tibetan community into exile. Finally, when Mongolia achieved its newfound religious freedom after the Soviets left their country, monasteries sent lamas and ministers to ask the Dalai Lama where the ninth Jetsun Dampa was living all these years. The Dalai Lama responded to the people of Mongolia by recognizing the ninth Jetsun Dampa as the newfound spiritual leader of Buddhism in Mongolia. Recently, in 2000, things with Jetsun Dampa do not seem to be going very smoothly. The Mongolian government supposedly does not even permit Jetsun Dampa to visit the country because they are afraid that he will lay claim to political power there. This would have proven a problem in Mongolia because in the 1960 Mongolian constitution, it guarantees freedom of religion in Mongolia and more of a separation between church and state. In a recent interview, however, the ninth Jetsun Dampa said that he has no interest in Mongolian politics. In 1999, Jetsun Dampa did actually visit Mongolia on a tourist visa so that Mongolian government couldn't do anything about it. He was well received by the people of Mongolia, and many people even expressed that they want him to revisit or come live in Mongolia as an active Buddhist teacher. Buddhism's existence in Mongolia as both a sacred religion and way of being for Mongolian people has had long-lasting and deep roots. Even though at times the Mongols were shot down and forced to fight for their freedom and their religion, they always came back to Buddhism and worked to protect it. Especially crucial to Buddhism's survival in Mongolia were certain strong figures like Jetsun Dampa, who represent an awakening and a calling to action of Buddhist people of Mongolia to continue to worship and spread their religion.